but this allows Alireza to step it up, attacking the pawn and winning a tempo.
Is he going for activity with king g5 and giving up the a6 pawn and just push h5 and then h4 and look at, wow, this is a very ambitious way of playing, also a very risky way, but I see quite a lot of potential.
I just eventually see white stepping up with the king to g1 to keep things guarded in that position.
Yeah, but look at this, yeah, rook b4 is already a defensive move, signaling that Alireza feels like, but he wants rook a4, so yeah, but okay, I don't care. King g5, knight d4, and then knight f3 check, just to also get some stability like this. Not to this, with 45 seconds on the clock.
I like this move, Peter.
Yeah, it's a classy move.
It's a really classy move. You're stepping up on a file attack on this a6 pawn, and
then your knight will be mobile.
It's not ideal, yeah, for
because the rook protects the a2 pawn and attacks the a6 pawn, and the knight can start jumping.
And once again, the ideas of this pawn moving forward by itself, I really do think that white will sidestep that threat, and this g-pawn moving forward is just too many moves. Magnus goes for bishop c3, expecting rook a4. Wow. Magnus doesn't care about the a6 pawn. He's going for counterplay with the e-passer.
Yeah, but now his bishops are vulnerable. Yeah, those bishops are not protected anymore. White has this king g1, king f2 idea. Yeah, making sure that we are guarding that e-pawn. The bishop on c3 is kind of nicely dominated by the knight on b3, that there are no bishop d4 checks.
But can you get greedy with rook a6? Because I'm trying to calculate this line after e4, and I'm not so sure if you have the time.
I don't want to be greedy. I want to stabilize, but Alireza down to 15 seconds. He takes the pawn.
And we're going to see absolute chaos on the board. 20 seconds for Alireza. It is a 10-second increment, but that e-pawn is starting to look dangerous. He's reaching out for the knight. He does reroute it, controlling the e2 square as well.
But can you really just block it with the knight? Because bishop gets to d2 and then that bishop will start hunting that knight on the light squares.
I wonder if his defensive setup is but you're not in time. If you go knight e2.
Bishop d2.
Bishop d2. And the point is you're not in time with king g1,
no,
king f1.
d6.
There was a threat of bishop c4.
Rook d6. And look at it, according to evaluation bar, Alireza is doing kind of normal things, but to my eyes this is extremely scary, with 15 seconds on the clock to relying on, you know, some magic defense.
Can you take bishop a2 here?
Yes, you can, but at least then it's a draw. I take e2, rook e6, I take, and I'm gonna hold this endgame. I play knight c1 immediately.
It's on the board. I mean, with the black pieces, I think it makes sense to go for this. Bishop into pawn, and the line that we were looking at, you won that pawn, and I wonder if Alireza missed this opportunity, and now just e1, and the knight is good enough, but this is ending into a draw.
Watch out, because bishop d2 is a threat, so the knight has to move immediately.
Immediately come back.
But you don't have time to play g3, so this is a scary kind of position. Black king is coming. It's not the usual typical dead draw. That's what I'm trying to say.
You just place it on g3, controlling a lot of squares, as well as stopping the idea of this king coming out with g3.
This is very scary.
It's not over.
Not over at all. Yeah, king g1, king f1, king e2, probably trying to run out. Magnus will be pushing those pawns. The good news is that it's bad color.
Yes.
Yes, so the drawish margin is extremely high. Alireza is now also giving the checks. Please ignore the evaluation bar. I think the bar froze there, and Alireza is trying to survive. He's now also gathering time, and he's over a minute. It should be a draw.
And I want to point out that key defensive point that you were making earlier, Peter. It is so important that the H-pawn is of the wrong color complex to Magnus's bishop. If we imagine a position without the knight and without the G-pawns, it is a theoretical draw once white king lands on the H1 square. And this is a decision to make, that do you actually now keep your king on F1? He does. You don't want it boxed up on H1.
Yes,
He's starting to target the pawns. H5. I think he's going to start putting pressure on the pawns, forcing them to push forward.
Yeah, but knight e6 always bishop d6. Yeah, the bishop has this power of dominating the knight. So I would feel like knight e4 check, just to ask a question. Please show me where do you go. Magnus goes bishop d8. Beautiful, stunning. Knight takes h7, bishop e7 would be game over. Stopping, locking that knight, and then the king marches all the way back to h6, catches that knight. So be careful. And Magnus's idea is not to push his pawns yet. He wants to play on Alireza's nerves.
Really classy move there by Magnus. And this point you're making of bishop e7, for newer chess audience, we speak about this so much, that the bishop at a 2 square difference from the knight often dominates it and takes away the key escaping squares, and it's a great way to trap your opponent's minor pieces.
Yeah, and we had that mirror situation with knight on a2 and bishop d2. Yeah, it's very much the same motive against knight on h7 and bishop e7. But I feel like knight e4 check exactly on the board. That king needs to be challenged. Now Magnus has to decide king h2, but then white gets king f2, king f3. Yeah, king f4 is the natural move, of course, to come back. And then jump with the knight to, I don't know, c3 maybe.
You kind of don't want to go too deep into this camp, because you just feel that your knight might end up without squares to retreat. You might just go to a point of no return. So Alireza always eyeing squares with the knight jump.
Yes, it's actually a nice kind of move, because if you play bishop b6, there are some knight d7, bishop d4, knight f8 ideas. But again, be careful, because the knight can get trapped. So I'm not a fan of going after any pawn, any of black's pawns. Much more important somehow to activate that white king. But we can never play king f2 because of bishop b6. We have to watch out for that diagonal.
All right, now Magnus needs to watch out for this threat of knight e6. So he's just deciding where to place his bishop. Bishop f6 looks like a natural move here. You're also eyeing the d4 square.
Basically, I would argue that every single move which does not blunder the bishop, like bishop, everything is natural. Bishop e7, just to ask the question to the knight, is bishop b6, bishop f6, every single move. The king should stay on f4. That's clear. Bishop b6 played. Okay, nice.
Yeah, this has been a topsy-turvy game. A fantastic sack by Alireza, putting the pressure on, winning the exchange, and then Magnus, with his resourcefulness, is the one who's up a pawn and now fighting for the win.
Yeah, it's whenever this is like, it almost feels like a complete draw, yeah, but when it's still playable, that's kind of so irritating. And now Magnus advancing his g pawn, yeah, he eventually will push g4, h5, and be careful, because if black is able to push, for example, the pawn to h3 and g8, gh, then there is no power to stop that h-pawn with the bishop on b6 eyeing the g1 square.
Now you have to make a decision. Does he push through with g4?
Yeah, probably. Maybe white wants to play knight h6. Is that a move trying to block the h-pawn? That would be kind of a defensive resource. Yeah, Magnus is going for it.
Oh my gosh, this is getting very tricky.
Yes, it's...
Knight h6, bishop e3, what is it that you want?
Well, knight f5 check.
King f4?
Yeah, and okay, at least the king is pushed back. I'm hoping for something. By the way, also this pawn endgame, can I ever take and then run to the corner? Normally it's losing, but sometimes it's a miracle draw.
Knight h6 has been played, so Alireza had to stop the advance of the h-pawn down the board.
Yeah, bishop c5, clearly it's kind of a Zugzwangish position also, yeah, because white's king cannot move.
I think you can't go h5 now. This is a little trap. You attack this pawn, well, you can step back with the king, but yeah, Alireza setting it up.
Lovely move, and the clocks are equal, both 30 seconds, but 10 seconds increment. Knight g8 was a lovely touch.
Really nice. And now if this black bishop, the point that we were making, could be on g5, it would be game over for white.
Magnus down to 15 seconds. He feels that this is such a chance. Yeah, bishop e3.
He's coming there. So you've got to move the knight. You can't allow this bishop to land on g5. The knight would be trapped.
What do you do? Knight f6. Yeah, knight f6, h6. And now we see that white is so important to play very good moves, because once you make them and you make another move, you get 10-20 seconds extra. You have the chance to bounce back. Knight h5 check. Now white wants to play knight e4. Yeah, knight e4, that would box black's king on h4. Magnus can't let that happen. Then suddenly white will be perfectly safe.
Yeah, and then you just shuffle with your king.
Yes.
You don't need to touch anything. King e2, king f1, and you achieve the draw. So Magnus has to run away with the king.
But now knight d5 and g3, he will have time to get g3, king g2 in.
Cemento.
That's a cemento structure. Yes, exactly.
Cemento achieved.
I think g3, king g2 on the board. Yeah. King f5. Now the only winning try is to try to trap that knight, but I believe that the g3 pawn will always give us shelter. We will be able to jump around.
Alireza just making sure that the knight doesn't get trapped because there are key squares that have been taken up by the bishop. I believe he can go king to g2 right now because if you start attacking it, immediately I've got knight f4.
Yes, it feels like it should be a draw, but you know, these are the most scary things when you suddenly lean back that yes, now I cannot lose, then usually you lose it. So be careful. King e4, very dominating setup with bishop on d4, king on e4. Alireza has to make sure that the knight will not be trapped. For example, knight e7, bishop c5. Okay, we can still run, but no, that's very scary. Where do we jump? And Alireza down to 11 seconds, 10 seconds. He has to find a good square with no time on the clock. 5 seconds.
Oh, make a move, and he does knight to f4.
With 2 seconds on the clock.
And I just want to quickly point out, if these two pawns are eventually traded with h5, h4, the king is perfectly placed on a light square. There'll be no progress by Magnus, and eventually this knight will sacrifice itself for the remaining pawn. Just don't trade the knights. Where do you go?
3 seconds.
He needs to make a move.
2 seconds.
And he does. Oh!
Knight h3,
Wow.
yes. Classy, but be careful because you don't have to take.
You don't have to take, but that is a stylish move. What we've been talking about, the wrong square, the wrong color pawn. If Magnus Carlsen takes the knight, that's an immediate draw. White's king will step back to h1, the square, the dream square that you need to. And Alireza, he's managed to get his knight safe with this tactical trick.
Yeah, he will be jumping knight f2, knight h3. This is his strategy. Yeah? Can he just jump back and forth? Yeah, knight f2, h5, knight h3.
That's quite incredible. And he does it. Peter, maybe this is...
maybe it's a fortress. Yes, maybe it's a fortress.
And I think Magnus is also just realizing it that he can't really fight it. There are enough squares for the knight to actually keep jumping around with this square on h3 where you're hanging a piece but it can't be picked up.
And what a save. By basically, okay, we don't know yet if Alireza saves it, but he finds this saving resource. Yeah?
Amazing.
With 2 seconds on, of course, he had foreseen bishop d6. Yeah, Magnus is playing on his opponent's nerves.
So if you get your bishop to this diagonal, you control these two squares, but you give up control of the other squares then.
And knight g5. We can jump back to h3, so what's the issue? It will be very frustrating for Magnus because he might have felt that I have a chance. Yeah, it's king d4, king is coming back.
We're coming back, why? Because he doesn't even need to change his plan. And if he's feeling very fancy, he can even throw in this check.
Yes.
Knight e6, knight g7 now.
Wow.
Ooh, that might be immediately. Okay.
But be careful because then and then knight f4, yes. But you don't want to change your defensive setup. Yeah, you feel like you are saving things thanks to this stunning resource. Yeah, Magnus is going king e4. Okay, knight f2 check.
This is so instructive. After Magnus gets this pawns on g4 and h5, suddenly this idea of just shuffling around with offering a free knight. And Magnus can keep moving his king, but it's not going to help anymore.
But look at this, he's very tricky because he's inviting, please go with your knight to d3, yeah, just get lost from h3, and Alireza says, no, I'm gonna insist on h3 because it's, the knight feels the most secure on the attacked h3 square, it's fantastic. And knight h3 back.
Yes, because the only thing
but
you have
be
to
careful,
make sure,
bishop e3, be careful. Bishop e3.
King, you'll have to then shuffle with your king.
Oh, but then king e4 and
yeah.
not
Knight
that it
h3
suits
loses. Knight h3
Yes.
loses.
Oh my gosh,
Exactly.
big moment.
Knight d3 or knight d1. Only moves.
With
Just
7
set up
seconds,
this
4 seconds.
Massive trick.
Oh no!
Whoa!
Oh no!
Oh my gosh!
Bishop e3.
Oh wait, maybe I was wrong.
Knight f2.
Or maybe I
yes.
was wrong. Maybe I was wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, knight f2. Yeah, I was calculating this pawn endgame, but it's kind of scary. Yeah, that you play king e5, the king is coming to e2. Yeah, it's the knight will be boxed.
So actually Magnus found the perfect square for the bishop to target the idea, because after your king does come to e2, your knight on h3 will be trapped. You can't keep the fortress anymore.
Knight d3 was only move.
Yeah.
And he finds it.
Yeah, but now he has to jump around with his knight in a completely different,
Yes. Because this would have lost
in
this
enemy,
game pawn
yeah,
ending.
exactly, in enemy's territory, and now Magnus is running after that knight, bishop c5. How do you escape? Knight c6?
How does Magnus manage to do this? He just
King
broke
d5.
a fortress we thought which was impossible.
Well, he doesn't believe in fortresses. And it's
over.
apparently it's over. Yeah, how
It's
do you
over.
escape with the knight? Yeah, it's getting trapped. Knight d8, it's also trapped. Knight d8 has to be played.
God. You still have... But the thing
But
is...
it runs nowhere
bishop
from...
This is crazy.
Yeah, chess is the most dramatic of all games. This is, and now with freestyle chess, this is insane because we get this from first move.
And he pauses. He knows that he's done it. He's managed to trap the knight. Now he needs to find a way forward. Because my first instinct was take away this a5 square.
Yeah,
but
and
then
knight
he comes
d8, bishop
back.
a5. Yeah, and then you force the knight towards the f7 square because there is no real. But be careful, not that knight g5, knight
Yes.
h3 finds a bishop b4 on the board.
He has to go back.
Yes,
And Alireza is dreaming of this
yes.
to arrive once again.
Wow,
but-
bishop c3,
Oh,
knight f7, bishop f6, stopping the journey.
Oh my God.
And knight b7. Yeah, but knight b7 threatens absolutely nothing.
Yeah, you can just go king c6.
Okay, king c6, knight d8 check. It's not the end of the world, but
Back with the...
yeah, okay, it's bad. Yeah, what to do? It's losing, objective losing. But yeah, knight b7. Now also this king f2
Oh,
steps
bishop
into
b6.
bishop b6. It's over. Yeah, knight's game over. Bishop b6 tapping the knight. What a shocking result!
Oh
And
my
it
God.
just shows how brutal chess is. Alireza was fighting like a lion, but Magnus grinds him down.
And Alireza resigns. Magnus gets the first win in the playoffs. And what a topsy-turvy game this has been. Magnus in the back foot out of the opening, gives up an exchange, is forced to give up an exchange, and then finding the resources with the two bishops, and then eventually paying for a win and trapping the knight. I mean, this has been a masterpiece by Magnus. Nicholas, there were so many moments and the players were playing so quickly. We did